Warm welcome to today's video. I do appreciate you coming back. Now, I hope you got the chance to listen to Dr. Ko yesterday, who did an excellent report from the Philippines. Dr. Ko is a specialist in infectious diseases and a paediatrician, and he gave us some fascinating insight. So do and try and catch that if you can. Now, I'm going to jump pretty well straight in today with the United States because I've been reading some concerning news this morning. So let's jump into that now. Now, just before we do that, cases well over 9 million officially diagnosed, getting on for 500,000 deaths globally. This is the current global situation. We know the real numbers are higher, of course. Now, the United States, the data is accurate, fairly accurate coming from the United States. I get lots of emails saying, well, it's not accurate because of this and that. But overall, the United States is giving us good data. And the cases now are unfortunately approaching the 2.5 million stage. That will not be long now, unfortunately. Well over 2 million cases. And we remember 121,225 deaths in the United States attributable to an infection with the novel coronavirus. Now, the thing that was concerning me is the trends in the United States at the moment. The way things seem to be going, the kind of trajectory that many states are on. 7 states have reported their highest coronavirus patient admissions. So hospital admissions are higher in 7 states than ever before. And those states are Arizona, Arkansas, California, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Texas. So the fact that the cases in hospital are already increasing, or the admissions to hospital are increasing, means that the cases have already increased. So the community spread, the community transmission has already increased, indicating there's more community transmission. And while this is concerning in its own right, it means there's more hospital admissions to come, because we know that a percentage of the people that get this infection become sick to the point where they require medical care and hospitalisation. So this is a trend, you see. There's more to come on this one. Texas recorded its highest daily increase in cases on Tuesday. California likewise with 5,000 new cases on Tuesday alone. And cases also increasing in Arizona, Nevada and Missouri. So these are concerning trends, and the trends are upwards. Now, to illustrate the sort of problems that this is going to bring about in the next few weeks in the United States, Florida, Homestead Hospital, report their intensive care unit is at capacity. It's at capacity now. They cannot take new admissions at the moment. So what does this mean? Well, at this stage, it will mean that people that require this form of intensive care will need to be transported to other facilities in other parts of the state and even out of state, even in other parts of the United States. But as this becomes a greater problem because of this trend that I am currently concerned about, it could mean that people that require the more intensive forms of medical care are going to have difficulties accessing that care because of the number of people that require that care all at once. And of course, resources are always limited. So that's a concern, and this will mean, as is already happening in numerous other countries around the world, that the case fatality rate will increase, because we know that good medical care can save lives, and that's now becoming a challenge already with this upward trend. And again, Florida, 3,200 new cases on Tuesday, so some of these are going to be critical, and that's going to increase demand even further. But it indicates there's been a lot of community spread in the United States since the easing of restrictions. So this is the main point, really, that this data seems to be telling us. There's been an easing of restrictions in the United States. We know that's been necessary. We could argue about it till the cows come home, but it's happened. And now the bill is coming in for that. The cases are increasing, and the trajectory is upwards at the moment. So things are increasing in the States and will probably carry on increasing for the next month or two, because we know that, as we've seen from many countries and examples around the world, there's this long lag effect. Now, Dr. Fauci, he's come up with some good stuff, come up with some not so good stuff, but reporting to Congress, this all makes sense. Wear a mask in busy public places. He pleads with people to wear a mask in busy public spaces, as indeed do I. This needs to be universal in all indoor public spaces. Outdoor, the risk is way less. Indoor, the risk is way higher. Dr. Fauci's plan A, don't go into a crowd. Plan B, if you do, make sure you wear a mask. So I agree fully with that. And he says the next few weeks will be critical. I agree. And unfortunately, I see things increasing for the next month or two. As always, we need much more individualised contact tracing and isolation in the States. As in anywhere, the principles are exactly the same. So that is a bit of a worry at the moment. Things are definitely well on the way up, and quite steeply so in the States. The Americas generally, actually, the World Health Organization, of course, has described this as an epicenter now. Now, Brazil, number of cases increasing. Again, these are formally diagnosed cases, so well over 1 million. Formally diagnosed cases now. We know the real number is way higher. We know the real number of deaths is way higher. We've seen this documented, that people, especially in rural areas, especially in indigenous areas, who are dying almost certainly of COVID-19, but of course we don't know for sure because of the lack of testing, but almost certainly because of COVID-19, and yet the deaths are not being attributed to that. Now, the political, what's the word I'm looking for? Leadership? Is that the word I'm looking for? Political leadership in Brazil? Perhaps not. But the political boss, President Bolsonaro, it's just been lamentable, of course. But I'm delighted to see he's been ordered to wear a mask by a High Court judge because he's been going in public places without a mask. World leaders need to be setting an example, as we've said many times. So many people are going to die because of the lack of approach taken in Brazil. And of course, the people that die are the poor people, it's the people in the slums, it's the people in the indigenous areas, it's the poor people who always seem to suffer the most. And that's exactly who is suffering at the moment in Brazil. And I'm going to pass on because I'm getting cross. Mexico. Again, great increase in cases in Mexico. Great challenges in healthcare provision in Mexico. Now, Russia is reporting just over 600,000 cases. And I could report the death rate in Russia. But let's say when I do report the death rate in Russia, I get feedback on emails, feedback on that. Let's just remind ourselves that the World Health Organization don't understand the Russian figures, and the European Union don't understand the Russian figures either. That's all I'm saying about that. But today they are holding, as far as I understand it, they're holding this huge World War II victory parade. Now, I can understand this. You know, we tend to think that, of course, you know, the price paid by the United States, by Europe in the Second World War was massive. But Russia lost more deaths than anyone else, and I mean, largely due to political ineptitude and callous disregard for human life, but that's a separate thing. But the bottom line is you can't take away the level to which the ordinary Russian people suffered. There's no question about that. I've met some of them. Well, I met people who were engaged in Russia in the Second World War. And so they're having this huge victory parade, which is understandable, but it's not the time for it. It's going to cause more spread. And there's elections as regarding the future of political leadership in Russia that are on today, I think tomorrow. So a cynic might think that the World War II victory parade is a political device to increase popularity of the leadership. Good job I'm not a cynic. Now, what I want to talk about today is vaccines. So focusing on vaccines now. Experimental vaccines. I think before I do that, I'll just mention the UK. Now, as you know, pubs are opening in the UK on the 4th of July. It's our Independence Day. And this is how apparently who sent this? It was Alan sent this in. Anyway, I think it might have been Alan sent this in. How pubs are going to work in the UK. So we see it's going to be waitress service because we don't want people crowding around the bars. So this is the thing in pubs in the UK. People crowd around the bars, and we just can't have that. So there's going to be waitress service. So let's look at this example. So very encouraging to see the waitress there was maintaining social distance as she served the drinks. Now, getting back to the serious issues of the day, and we are serious again now. Sorry about that. Experimental vaccines. About 40. It's hard to tell actually. There's at least a dozen, and there's probably about as many as 16. It's quite hard to get the exact figures on this. I've certainly counted 12 different experimental vaccines around the world, which is good, of course. But none have successfully completed phase 3 trials. So phase 1 is trials on a small number of people. Phase 2 is trials on a larger number of people. Phase 3 is actually seeing, does it work in the real world? So there's a few actually now in phase 3 trials around the world being tested on real people to see if it gives them protection from the disease. But none of those have yet reported. So this is the stage we're at. So to focus in on just one or two of those, but perhaps mainly on this one, COVID-19 vaccine tests begin in South Africa. And now I believe the Oxford group that we're talking about here has been doing some work in Brazil as well, but I couldn't find much documentation on that. But I've got good documentation on this, so this is this is definitely true. Now, University of Oxford Jenner Institute. So Edward Jenner. Now, Edward Jenner's a fascinating character. He was the first doctor in the UK. He's attributed as the I think he's called the father of immunology. So what he did was Edward Jenner noticed that Sarah. There was this girl who used to walk past Edward's house called Sarah, and he used to notice her walking past the house, which is understandable. And her name was Sarah Nelms. And Edward Jenner, apart from noticing her walking past the house, noticed that she always seemed to be very healthy. So one day Edward Jenner decided to get a bit closer to Sarah, and he found on her hands that she had cowpox pustules. Because she was a milkmaid, she milked the cows. And she got this disease called cowpox from the cows, and she had these small pustules on her hand. Didn't make her sick, just these small sores on her hand. But then he also noticed that milk workers didn't get smallpox. So he thought, is it the cowpox that's protecting from the smallpox? So what he did was he went onto his estate. People used to have estates in those days. And there was a healthy young boy there called James Phipps. And what Edward Jenner did was he took some cowpox pus from Sarah, put it on James's arms and worked it in. And that's called an inoculation. And that gave James protection. By exposing him to cowpox, it gave him protection against smallpox because it's a very similar virus. Only the cowpox doesn't make you as sick. And then he exposed James to smallpox and James didn't get it. I'll leave you to consider the ethics of that experiment on your own. Sorry, that was a complete distraction, but it's a genuine true story from the history of medicine. And Edward Jenner gets all the credit, but James Phipps was the person who took the risks. And Sarah was also involved. Anyway, I digress. So Edward Jenner Institute. So in other words, it is a leading vaccination institute. Now, currently, the Oxford vaccine is being trialled on 4,000 people in the UK. And there's an additional 10,000 planned. All good, but the more numbers, the better. And actually, in the UK at the moment, it's a bit of a problem because we haven't got enough active cases at the moment. So, you can vaccinate 4,000 people and then only one or two of them might catch the disease because we haven't got a lot of the disease around at the moment. Although there are still several thousand new cases per day. It hasn't gone away by any means. And I am expecting cases to increase after the 4th of July. But anyway, another 10,000 planned. So all good, but more numbers are better. So South Africa, now Oxford University have collaborated with a university in South Africa to bring about this large scale, to expand the phase 3 clinical trial in South Africa. Now, there is a history of drug companies doing research. HIV, for example, was one where the ethics were very questionable, where rich companies from the West would go to African countries and just start doing experiments on the people. This is not the case. This South African study has been rigorously reviewed and approved by the South African health authorities, the Products Regulatory Authority of South Africa, and the Human Research Ethics Committee of the University of now I think it's called Wits University, and it's Witwatersrand University. It's normally called the University of Wits, but very reputable South African university. So I'm not concerned about the ethics of that, and believe me, if I was, I would shout about it. But it does seem to be all being done correctly. Now, frustratingly, we don't have any numbers of people that are being trial vaccinated with the Oxford vaccine. It's the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, isn't it? We don't have any numbers. So we know 4,000 in the UK, 10,000 planned. We don't know the numbers in South Africa yet, but we do know that people are being vaccinated experimentally now as we speak. This has started. Trial volunteers administered with the COVID-19 vaccine. What they're looking for is safety. Is this vaccine safe? It must do no harm. And does it work? Efficacy. They're the two questions. Is it safe? Does it work? Now, this was a bit disappointing. More than a year, provided it's found to be effective. So if this is found to be safe, and it's looking like it is from the phase 1 and phase 2 trial, so it's looking like it's safe, and if it's proved to be effective, so again, it's proved effective in laboratory studies, but does it work in the real world? This is a phase 3 clinical trial in the real world. Does it work in the real world is the question. Is it efficacious? Now, if it is, if both of those criteria met, it's still going to be more than a year until it's in production, and it's going to be the second half of 2021. And they're talking about September, October 2021 as the earliest. Now, having said that, if this vaccine is available in the second half of 2021, it will be the fastest vaccine ever produced. That's for sure, by a long, long way, but it's still a frustratingly long way off. That probably means we've got this pandemic with us until September or October 2021, before the vaccine comes to the rescue as the cavalry rides over the hill. The vaccine is the thing that's going to end this. I do believe we're going to get one, but it's not going to be in 2020, that's for sure. And it looks like they're towards the end of 2021. Now, engineered to express the SARS coronavirus 2 spike protein. Right. So what this vaccine's doing? This is interesting, actually. So, what we have, the COVID-19 virus, as you know, has got these proteinaceous spikes sticking out of it like this. So these are the spikes on the end here, like that. Those spikes. Now, what the immune system does is it recognises these spikes as being foreign, and then the immune system will produce a protein called an antibody, which will then bind onto that spike and stop it from working. Because it's that spike, so and obviously antibodies will bind to all of these spikes and stop them from working. So antibodies bind to those spikes. So what you need is these antibodies. Now, it's been demonstrated that people who have had COVID-19, who've actually had the disease, do make these antibodies here. These antibodies that will inactivate these infectious spikes. So people that are exposed to the virus do make these, and we have good evidence now that these are conferring immunity. So what this means is if someone's had the virus, they produce these antibodies, the virus comes into the body a second time, these antibodies will immediately neutralize this virus. So here's the imagine this is the cell here that the virus is trying to infect. So that's the cell there. Then on the surface of these cells we have these receptor sites here. And what the virus does is these spikes here from the virus What they do, those spikes, of course, there's other spikes there as well. What these spikes do? There we go. What these spikes do is they fit into, it's called the process of adsorption. They adsorb into this receptor site, and you might remember this as the ACE2 receptor site. And that allows the viral genetic material to get into the cell where it reproduces and produces hundreds of new viral particles, which are then ejected from the cell. So this antibody neutralizes this. Now, the Oxford vaccine, what they've done is they've engineered a protein which looks like the same as one of these spikes, like that. So the Oxford vaccine basically is injecting millions of these things in the vaccine, like that. Now, these are not the spikes from the virus, and it's not a living virus. It's not you're not introducing virus into the body, but the immune system will recognize the shape of these, like that, and it will make the antibodies to them. So that means you get the antibodies, you get these antibodies here without having suffered the disease, because these aren't attached to a virus, so they're not going to cause the infection. So the vaccine this is the vaccine here, and it's going to cause the body to make the same antibodies that it would make if it was actually exposed to the virus. And that means that if the person's exposed to the virus again, they should not get the disease. That's the theory. The clinical trial is to show, does that work? So antibodies produced against sections of the spike protein after natural infections are able to kill the virus when tested in the laboratory. So what they've done here is this group have taken people that have got better after having COVID-19 infection. They've taken the antibodies from their blood, and they've put some virus on the bench, in vitro, in scientific glass, scientific situations to look at that. They've put the virus there, and then they've put these antibodies from people that have had the disease, and these antibodies from people that have had the disease do neutralize the virus. So the theory here is all perfect. So that we know that the antibodies neutralize the virus. We believe that people who have had the disease don't get it again, at least in the short term. That's the overwhelming consensus at the moment. So this vaccine will artificially stimulate the immune system to make those same antibodies, thereby conferring immunity without getting the disease. That's the plan. Not a live vaccine, does not replicate inside the body. So that means it's kind of likely to be safe, because it's not replicating, it's just stimulating the immune system to produce these antibodies. Workers in the vaccine field in this university have said it might not protect some people from becoming infected, but will protect someone from becoming clinically ill. So people could still get infected, but the viral load, the viral particles will be neutralized sufficiently so that people do not get the infection by blocking up these nasty active spikes on the virus, which allow it to be adsorbed into previously healthy cells where the virus replicates. So that's that vaccine. Now, as I say, there's many others around the world. We haven't got time to look at others. I haven't prepped others, but Chinese National Biotech Group, for example, approved to run a large phase 3 clinical trial in the United Arab Emirates. So again, China's got the same problem as the UK, really, because there's fewer cases in China. They can't do a phase 3 clinical trial. So the Chinese authorities are doing that trial in the United Arab Emirates. Always good to see these international collaborations. So more news on the UK tomorrow. For now, let's just look at some people. There you are. I think. Where have you gone? All right, you'll come back in a minute. There we are. Sorry, technical issues. Yes. Right, here we have Jan, who watches in Victoria. So delighted to see you're watching down there in Australia, Jan. Thank you for watching. Thank you for the picture. This is Margaret in Queensland. Now, what's happened here is, I don't know if we can see that letter, but she sent me a copy of it. But what happened here is the authorities in Taiwan And of course, you might remember we interviewed Craig from Taiwan. I've sent a batch of these excellent quality masks from Taiwan to Australia. And we can see they're very good quality masks. And if they use them in Taiwan, to be quite honest, that's good enough for me, because we know that Taiwan had remarkable success against this virus and is still having remarkable success. So delighted to see the Taiwanese are sharing their masks around the world now. Now, Margaret in Queensland doesn't say, but I assume these are washable and reusable, and they look very good quality. So I'm sure Dr. Fauci would approve. So thanks for that picture, Margaret. And indeed, thank you to the government of Taiwan for providing masks. If they want to send me a batch as well, that would be nice also. Oh, this is Michael, who gets 2 mentions because he makes my broccoli soup. So you might not have seen that, but I did a cooking recipe for broccoli soup. I might post it as a link. It was an interesting video to make. Anyway, Michael's eating it, and as I said, Michael's looks better than mine. This was Richard in Nottingham, who's taking part in the COVID-19 home antibody testing research study. So what happened here was they sent out some tests. I think it's just fingertip blood tests, and they people are filling those out to give us data on the prevalence of the virus in the community, which of course is quite invaluable. So thank you for that picture, Richard. Now this is Shahid from Motherwell. Now I think Shahid's been on before, but people from Motherwell are always welcome. So anyone else in Motherwell, do send your picture in. Motherwell's a town in Scotland, if you don't know it, which perhaps most people in the world don't. Anyway, Shahid, I think you've got on twice there, but that's fine. Always welcome. And you're taking D, kind of back to front, but it looks like vitamin D3, I think. So glad to see you taking that. So thanks for that, Shahid. Glad you're still faithfully watching. We do appreciate it. This is Jakub from Handershoof. I'm not quite sure where that is. Is it the Netherlands? I'm not sure. Sorry about that, Jakub. It could be Poland, actually, come to think of it. Anyway, I'm glad you're watching wherever you're watching. And if you do correct me, I will show your picture again with the correct details. But thank you for watching.